You might be wondering, what is the difference between Spanish and Portuguese? Well, if you're like me, I have the same exact question. So what I want to do today is an experiment. I want to read and listen to the first chapter of my first Portuguese book called Caminho a Cristo. And I think it's going to be really interesting what happens. My name is Franklin, and this is first1000hours.com. Don't give up on your language learning marathon. You can make it. You can make it through your first 1,000 hours. I am a native English speaker born and raised in the United States, and I've also taken an interest in Spanish. So I've read over 3,800 pages in Spanish. I've also listened and watched a lot of things in Spanish, as well as placed myself in all Spanish environments, like going to a Spanish church or going to Spanish Zoom meetings. So I believe that I can share a comparison between Spanish and Portuguese based on my own experience. I have a very limited background with Portuguese. I have not taken any classes on how to learn Portuguese in school, and I've not taken any online classes about that as well. At this moment in time, I do not want to spend my first 1,000 hours seeking to learn Portuguese. So I'm not taking this in a serious manner at this moment in time. And then also, I remember one time I was looking at this church program in South America, and people were speaking mainly in Portuguese and Spanish. So there was a time where there's people or a person that was speaking in Portuguese, and then there was a translator that was translating what that person was saying or people were saying into Spanish. And I was so happy I could have that translation, because Spanish was familiar with me, whereas Portuguese wasn't. So I have watched a few videos in Portuguese, not too many, and I've listened to a little bit of Portuguese audio. But what got me interested in wanting to do this experiment today is because I was reading paragraphs in Portuguese, and I was able to understand the context of what was being written. And so I was like, whoa, well, I need to probably take this to the next level and seek to read this book, at least one chapter of this book, and listen to the first chapter as well, Caminho a Cristo in Portuguese, and see what would happen. And I thought I would share that with you as well. So why do I want to start with reading and listening to at least part of this Portuguese book? Well, there's different reasons. One of them being that my first Spanish book that I read was this one, El Caminho a Cristo. And this was very hard and difficult because I was transitioning from taking a Duolingo Spanish course to then reading and listening to my first Spanish book. And for me, content matters. I like to read Philippians 4 and verse 8. Content, whatsoever things are pure and just and all of those things, whatsoever things are true. I want to focus on that. I also know that it's a principle of the mind that by beholding things, we become changed to whatever we're basically listening to or focusing on. And so I want to focus on things that are hard. And I believe that if I focus on things that are hard, it's going to be easier for those things to be familiar in the long term. And so I want to start with pushing myself and challenging myself, just like I did with Spanish. I also know that as I read this book, I'm going to pick up words and phrases that I can use not only in a religious context, but also in a secular context as well. So it's a win-win situation for myself starting in a new language. So I want to share with you my mindset in going into reading and listening to the first chapter of my first Portuguese book. First of all, I have prayed, and then I also like to claim the promise of Philippians 4 and verse 13, which says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And so the third thing I like to do is focus on what I can do. So I encourage you, focus on what you can do. And I want to explain that part a little bit more, because I am going to use anything I can to help me understand the context of what I am reading. So I'm going to look for any type of pattern. I'm going to look for any similarity I have with my English and Spanish backgrounds. So I want to elaborate on that point, focus on what you can do a little bit more by showing you how you can actually use a background of English and Spanish to help you understand Portuguese. So let's look at the English title again. The English title is Steps to Christ, right? And so that is, and then we have El Caminho a Cristo. And then the Portuguese title is El Caminho a Cristo. So if we look at this, we can be really discouraged if you look at this title. We're like, oh man, I don't know what this is. It's in Portuguese. I have no understanding of Portuguese. There's no way I can understand everything. But first, you should focus on what you can do. So what are the similarities with these titles? One of them is the titles are in the same alphabet system. I'm thankful I'm not having to learn other characters at this moment in time. I can use the same alphabet. Okay, and then the second thing is that there's one word that is similar in all the three titles, and that is Christ or Cristo. Okay, so even if I just know that one word, when I look at the title of this book right here, I should be able to understand a whole lot of the context. And so I should be able to know, okay, this is about Christ. This has something to do with Christ. And then Camino, look at this, Camino and Caminho in Spanish and Portuguese, it's almost the same thing. So I get to understand from my Spanish background that Camino a Cristo means way to Christ. And so that is how I'm going to approach reading in Portuguese. I've wanted to document my experience so much that I haven't even taken off the shrink wrap yet, but I have been reading the back cover. So I want to share with you some of the similarities I found with Portuguese and English and Spanish, but especially Spanish. So I'll just share with you some of them. Publicado is very similar to published in English. And then M is very similar to in Spanish. And when you really understand that N is the same thing as M, then you can also even see the link of N in English. All right, todo in Portuguese is the same spelling as todo in Spanish. And so todo means all. Mundo is the same spelling as it is in Spanish. Mundo means world. So traducido, I believe, is a very similar word in Spanish. So traducido means translated. Maíz is very similar as well. It means in Portuguese, it has to mean more. And so más is in Spanish, what it means is more in Spanish. And then 160 lenguas. So lenguajes is what you would say in Spanish. So I can just see a lot of things like livro in Portuguese is the same as libro in Spanish. So that means book. And popular is the same English spelling. So and capítulos means chapters in Portuguese, and means the same thing in Spanish. And so there's a lot of different things that I can pull from the back cover that help me to understand Portuguese and get the context. So I'm going to listen and then read and then listen again to the first chapter of this book. And I'm going to do that without any assistance from any dictionary or Google Translate. And so I will let you know how it goes. I do believe in terms of reading, I have an advantage because I have a familiarity with Portuguese, I think, because of my Spanish background especially, but I will let you know how it goes. Okay, so I am 1 minute into listening to this audio, actually 59 seconds, but I already am experiencing a lot of things that are similar to Spanish. Now, I listened to the Spanish audio of El Camino a Cristo many different times. And so I remember part of that Spanish. And so when I'm listening to the Portuguese, it's coming back to my remembrance some of the things I've listened to in Spanish. So there are differences. I didn't understand everything, but I could tell you that it was a lot easier for me to understand listening to the Portuguese than it was when I was transitioning from Steps of Christ in English to listening to Spanish. It was like a whole totally different language. This sounds a little bit more familiar than unfamiliar to me. Now to say that I would know everything, no, I don't. But yeah, that's what I want to say going a minute into this. So I'm going to continue listening as well. Okay, now I am 1 minute and 59 seconds into this, and I still hear things that are similar to Spanish. Now, I think that it's going a little bit less now, especially with Portuguese. I'm not knowing as much. I would say there's still definitely a familiarity between Spanish, not with English, not at all, in my opinion. But I it's not as easy to understand. So I think I had a little bit more of the understanding of Spanish with that first paragraph or whatever I was listening to, because I probably listened to that more and the most. But now I'm getting into things that I might not remember as much. And so there's a little bit more of a difficulty, but I'm still seeking to pay attention because I know that I'm going to focus on what I can do. And I'm still having that mindset of Philippians 4 and verse 13. So I'm going to continue listening. Okay, so I am 4 minutes and 48 seconds into listening to this audio, and I still can pick up things that are different. Like the same word, it seems like for birds is the same, basically the same word in Spanish and Portuguese. I've heard aves, something like that. I've heard misericordia, which I don't, it might have been pronounced something different in Portuguese. Again, I don't know Portuguese, but it's like, okay, misericordia in Spanish is very similar. Dios is very similar in Spanish and Portuguese. And so I'm picking up words, but I think some of my struggle right now is I'm focusing on what I can do. I'm focusing on the words, and I'm getting a somewhat of a context. I know somewhat of the scriptures that is being presented, as well as maybe some of the things that are said, but it's like having the collective sentence is a little bit hard for me at this moment in time, as I have been just listening to the Portuguese. But I would say that, again, this is a lot better than how it has been for me to start listening to Spanish. All right, I'm going to continue. All right, I should say something about what I just listened to. I'm at the 6 minute and 2 second mark. What is interesting is, again, I know some knowledge of like the scriptures that it's talking about. And so I first read that scripture that was just talking about like giving like Christ's mission and how he's coming to help the captives and helping the blind see and things like that. That was a scripture that he was referencing from Isaiah. And so I have read that many times in English, and I have read that in Steps of Christ in Spanish, El Camino de Cristo. So I'm using not only a background of Spanish, but yes, it's Spanish, but also some of the English background as well. And so, you just use whatever you can to learn the language. And so that's what I'm doing as I'm continuing to listen to things. So I'm going to continue right now. Okay, I'm at the 6 minute and 33 mark, and I've even heard some English like compassion. And then what was in Portuguese, I'm not sure what that word is, but it's like, whoa, it's like this almost the same thing, which I thought was cool. All right, I'm going to continue. So I just finished listening to the first chapter of Caminho a Cristo in Portuguese. And I would say that I have so much of an advantage now with Spanish than I had when I was listening to the first chapter of El Camino a Cristo, the Spanish version, because I just had the English background, and then going into Spanish, it was like totally different. But even so, I would say that Portuguese definitely is still a foreign language. And my understanding was maybe around 25%. I would say sometimes it was lower, sometimes it was higher. But again, that is so much more than when I was listening to the first chapter of El Camino a Cristo. Around that time that I was listening to the first chapter of El Camino a Cristo, my comprehension level was around 0 to 5%. Now, I think it's going to be really interesting what happens when I read the chapter and then go back and listen to it again. And so I wonder if my comprehension level will go up or down. We'll find out, I guess. So you got to stay tuned. Now I finally get to take off the shrink wrap, and I've been waiting for this for a long time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. All right. Yes, I am really excited to see how this looks and then start going ahead and reading it. So I'll let you know how it goes.